Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
This week we're discussing Chapter 19 of Ship of Destiny, Strategies. And we are catching up with Althea and Brashen. And everybody aboard the Paragon.
Yes.
Except for the ship himself, actually.
Yeah, it's maybe one of the first times that we've had them be on or around Paragon and then not gotten his point of view.
Yeah, at least for a while.
Yeah.
I know it kind of started out with that, but then once Paragon kind of joined the picture, we got his side of things. Most of the time, at least.
Yeah. So this is after Lavoy has jumped ship along with a few other crew members, and they are still in pirate waters.
Yes, they've they're camping up, and ostensibly they're lying in wait for Kennit to return to Divvytown, but also Althea privately knows that she and Brashen are trying to come up with a plan, any plan, of what to do next.
Right.
She kind of goes over what has happened since then, and it's been some reconfiguring. Half was promoted to second mate as she moves up to first mate, which is, the customary position. Second mate turns into first. And she is happy to note that the crew is happy with Half's promotion.
Right.
And things seem to be okay because the rest of the crew seems to think that the captain will figure it out of what they're doing next.
There's a little bit of fear happening with the crew, so they're a little bit scared. Lavoy, I guess, was riling them up and made them think that this was a bad idea.
That going against Kennit is basically suicide.
Right.
Is the way that it's put in the book, that they shouldn't even be doing this. So that's kind of the fear that he was spreading, that Althea and Amber and Brashen ultimately were worried about in the previous chapters, is that Lavoy was basically turning all of them against the mission that they were on.
Right. But here we have Althea talking with Amber about how awful the weather is. It's super foggy and there's just a lot of moisture in the air. And Amber wants to know if it's going to rain anytime soon to get the moisture out of the air.
Yeah, and Althea just kind of has to respond that this is the time of year that this happens. It's always foggy, it's always damp.
Right. And while they're having this conversation, Althea is packing a duffel bag because she's moving to the first mate's cabin. Mm-hmm. So she's going to make a move and is pretty excited for getting more room.
Yeah, exactly. And while she's packing, she's also, in Robin Hobb fashion, reminiscing on the past few days and the previous plans made and discussions had. And we have this in the middle of the chapter. And it's also so happens to be a memory of her in Brashen's bed while they're discussing plans.
Right.
But each taking turns distracting each other.
Yes. And while they're talking about plans, Brashen makes the comment that he wishes he had put Lavoy over the deck whenever he had his first thought that Lavoy may be causing mutiny.
Yeah.
But Althea remarks that wouldn't have been good for morale anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny because it's kind of taking up the opposite sides that they had originally.
Yeah.
Because Althea was all about throwing him over and Brashen's like, no, we can't do that.
But as Althea starts to try and distract Brashen, he asks, so is this it? Do you just want to give up and never go back to Bingtown?
She says, I've thought about it, but I can't. I'd always thought that Vivacia would be our major ally in reclaiming her from Kennit. I'd counted on the ship defying him to turn battle in our favor. Now that we know that Wintro is alive and well aboard her, and that they both seem content with Kennit, I don't know what to think. But I can't just walk away from her, Brash. They're my family. Vivacia is my ship. In a way she can never belong to anyone else. To give her up to Kennit would be like giving up a child to him. She may be satisfied with Kennit now, but in the end she'll want to come home to Bingtown. So will Wintro. Then where will they be? Outcasts and pirates. Their lives will be ruined. How can you know that? Brashen had protested. A smile curved his lips and he raised his brows as he asked her, would Keffria say this was where you belonged? Wouldn't she say the same things, that eventually you will want to come home and that I'm ruining you? Would you welcome her trying to rescue you from me? She had kissed the corner of his mouth. Perhaps I'm the one ruining you. I don't intend to let you go, even when we do go back home. But we are both adults, aware of that what this decision may cost us. We are both prepared to pay that cost and count it still a good bargain. But Wintrow is scarcely more than a boy, and the ship had barely awakened to life when she left Bingtown. I can't let them go. I have to at least see them, speak to them, know how they are. So there's still as I mentioned before, the crew's like, oh yeah, the captain will know what to do. Or at least we're laying in wait for Kennit to enact his plan. Meanwhile, Althea and Brashen have no idea what to do. They don't even know their full mind, really. Althea's kind of insistent that she has to at least try to talk to them, but there's not even a question of fighting over Vivacia anymore, really.
Right, yeah.
Because that surprise is gone. Kennit will have known now who was coming, or somebody was coming to claim Vivacia, so their best kept, I don't know, ace in the hole is now revealed.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, to hear Althea talk about this unsurety. I think we've seen it a little bit before she knew about Kennit as well.
Yeah.
Where she kind of has this feeling of not really wanting to go back to life as it was. It's not that she doesn't like Vivacia or doesn't still want Vivacia, but I think just the life she has lived so far and all of her experience has made her less willing to want to go with the Bingtown flow, and that she would have before, I guess. But here we have her struggling with that again with, well, maybe my ship doesn't even want me. And then what?
Yeah.
But she does point out that Kennit is not necessarily trustworthy, and you can't just allow children to agree to be pirates. You have to make sure that they know that there's another option.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And interesting she's finally admitting that she's choosing Brashen no matter what, even if they get the ship.
Yeah, and Brashen is asking her, well, sarcastically saying, yeah, maybe we can leave our calling cards with Kennit and then we can ask to visit with the two people. But then he does become a little bit serious and asks her, what if we just did return to Bingtown now? Because we have Paragon. I could marry you legally before all of Bingtown in the Trader's Concourse. We could do this properly. The Vestrits would still have a live ship, and we could trade and sail and relieve the debt, and Malta wouldn't have to, marry anybody she didn't want to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a better option, Wintrow and Vivacia don't seem to want to be rescued. Don't you see, Althea? You and I could just take our lives and live them. We don't need much, and we already have it. A good ship and a good crew, you beside me. That's all I'm asking of life. Fate has handed it all to me, and damn it, I want to keep it. Just say yes to me, he urged her sweetly, his soft breath warm on her ear and neck. Just say yes, and I'll never let you go. Broken glass in her heart. No, she had said quietly, I have to try, Brashen, I have to. I knew you'd say that, he had groaned. He loosened his arms, fell back from her, and gave her a weary smile. And then asks, so what do you propose to do? Sail up to him under a truce flag? And Althea's like, maybe.
Yeah. So it turns out that Althea kind of does want to go under a truce flag and try to bargain with him.
Yeah. Using her trader's heritage, basically.
Yeah.
Using advice that her father gave her about making the best deal. So she's going into it saying that Kennit seems to be beloved. He's not like a cruel and hard man that these people fear. They love Kennit.
Yeah.
He is a leader that they look up to. So we can't go into it expecting to ransom back the ship or attack or challenge Kennit, because that's not going to work. She says he sounds like an intelligent, rational man. If we went to him under a truce flag, he'd know the most sensible course was to hear us out. What could he gain by attacking us before he'd talk to us? We could offer him ransom money, but more than that, we could offer him the goodwill of at least one Bingtown trader family. If he genuinely wants to make a kingdom of the Pirate Isles, eventually he will have to seek legitimate trade. Why not with Bingtown? Why not with the Vestrits? Which is... it's really interesting to hear her say this, because, first of all, very smart tack to take.
Yeah.
However, what cause does Kennit have to attack the Paragon before they have a chance to talk? Well, his history with Paragon that he doesn't want leaking out to everyone.
True.
There's just the unknown factors that they don't know that kind of throws a wrench into their well-laid plans. And also that Kennit isn't as magnanimous as
and
he's
kind.
portrayed. Yes.
No, it's very interesting though. And I think, like you said, it is a good plan with what knowledge they have. It's unfortunate that it is incomplete knowledge. But I guess what other option is there? They're not going to win in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So what? I guess you try to talk it out if you can.
Yeah, so Brashen kind of is starting to take it seriously. He says, well, it'd have to be all written out to make it formal and to make a good bait. And the ransom that we have to give would have to just be the opening, and the real bait would be those trade agreements. Can you bind your family to an agreement with outlaws like these? Some folk in Bingtown will call you a traitor. She was silent and then finally said, I'm trying to think as my father would. He said the mark of a good trader was the ability to see ahead, to lay the groundwork for trading of tomorrow with the deals one struck today. It was short-sighted, he said, to squeeze the last bit of profit out of a trade. A wise trader never let the other man walk away feeling sour. I think this Kennit is going to succeed. So when she says that, she's saying that she thinks that Pirate Isles will become a kingdom, or at least some sort of nation, and that nation will need trade. So the first stop from Bingtown is going to be the Pirate Isles.
Yeah.
They can't just sail past it, ignoring a port to go to Jamalia.
Right.
That's dumb.
And also, things are pretty tense with Jamalia. They may not even want to trade with Jamalia in the future. So
yeah,
it is really good foresight to look ahead and think.
And it's a powerful ally too.
Yeah.
Buffering them from Jamalia.
Exactly. So I think it's really interesting to see this sort of thought process from Althea. It's really mature of her. And I think it really does speak to the growth that she's had. It feels natural to me, I guess. And I like that she's really learning as she goes here and does have some really good ideas.
Yeah. And she does say to Brashen that, I'll make sure he knows that it's just one family I'm speaking for, but where one trader goes, others often follow. And my family I know is going to be furious with me, but I have to do what I think is best. I think they would, yes, be furious, but also understand.
Right, because they want Vivacia and Wintro and Kyle back. And so, of course, they would agree with any means necessary, I think.
Right.
I don't think they're going to turn up their nose at any idea that gets them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But it is really interesting to have them, have Althea think that they'll just be disappointed in her again.
Yeah. So now Brashen tries to distract and succeeds in distracting Althea, and Althea is jolted out of her reverie of that distraction by Amber breaking in and asking, "What are you smiling about?" "Nothing," Althea says, and Jack says, "Nothing. Nothing except a bit more than the rest of us are getting." Amber's face had gone grave. Althea bit her tongue to hold it silent. Best to let this discussion die right here. She met Jack's gaze squarely. Jack didn't agree. "Well, at least you don't deny it. Of course, it would be rather hard to do so when you come in here late, purring like a kitten that's been into the cream, or sitting smiling to yourself, your cheeks as pink as a new bride's. You should make him shave so his whiskers don't rash the side of your neck like that." "What's it to you?" Althea asks. "Other than that it's completely unfair? Other than that you're stepping up to the mate's position at the same time you're falling into the captain's bed?" She rose from her bunk to stand before Althea. "Some people might think you don't deserve either." The tall woman's mouth was a flat line. Althea took a deep breath and readied herself. Jack was 6 duchies. On a 6 duchies boat, this out on deck were how a dispute over a promotion would be settled. Did Jack expect that here? That if she could beat Althea on the deck, she could step up to the mate's position? Then Jack's face broke into her customary grin. She gave Althea a congratulatory punch on the shoulder. But I think you deserve them both and wish you the best. So, he any good?
I love Jack. I do wonder, I think personally that she probably is a little bit grumpy about the situation because she was told.
Isn't fair.
Yeah, it isn't fair. And she specifically was told, hey, no messing around with people on deck. Mm-hmm. So she specifically was given orders not to dilly-dally. And now she has been sharing a room with someone who has been distinctly dilly-dallying with the captain of all people, who she also finds attractive. So I think it's funny for her to play into the maybe you don't deserve what you got sort of role, like her big intimidating stance, and then just be like, just kidding.
Gotta take the fun where you can get it.
Exactly. It's a boring time being on a ship that long.
So now Amber and Jack are kind of talking about what's going to happen with the room because Half is not moving into the second mate's quarters.
Right.
He is staying with the crew because of Lavoy scaring them, because of Lavoy riling them up. Half seems to think that he needs to spend some time to just kind of settle everybody's nerves and get them all working as one team again.
Right.
Which is a good idea.
Yeah. Also, I think nice of him because where would the 2 girls go?
Yeah.
I mean,
Jack would just sleep in a hammock.
I know
or whatever.
Jack would not care. Amber definitely needs privacy, and I feel like that would not go over well. Amber losing privacy. However, maybe Amber could then bunk with Althea again.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could be worked around. But Althea seemed to be pretty excited to have her own room. Yeah. Which seems a little unfair, but she's first mate, so.
Mm-hmm. Jack is excited to move into the top bunk. And they're talking about what to do with the extra space of dismantling the third bunk, whether to have a folding desk, or just have room to turn around.
Yeah. Although Jack does say she thinks they should keep it for half, all innocently. So
yes, yeah. And that's where Althea's like, sorry to disappoint you. He's staying with the crew.
And then Jack changes topics to what they're there for, and says, the captain must have a great plan for going after Kennit. What is it? Can you let us know? And Althea says, oh, it's a great plan.
Just deflecting.
Yeah. And then she thinks a little bit about the conversation they've had, because so Jack, when she learns that Half is staying with the crew because they're scared, she rolls her eyes basically at this, because she's like, we all knew joining this expedition that it was dangerous and we'd probably all die. If you didn't know, you're dumb. And it's probably good that those people left the ship because they were scared. Like, we already knew. You were upfront about that. So she has really said, this is basically, we all know we're going to die. It's fine. So as Althea is deflecting on this great plan they have against Kennit, she thinks, she tried not to wonder what judgment saw reserved for those who led others to their deaths. And I thought that was really interesting that here she has a moment of
like,
guilt.
Oh, I'm actually in charge now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Lives. If people lose their lives, it's my fault. It's more real.
Mm-hmm.
So I just found that really interesting.
Well, now we jump over to Serilla's point of view, which is interesting because we haven't had it for a little bit now. We've been through a lot of changes with Bingtown and with Serilla without getting her point of view.
Yeah.
And a lot of reflection on that. And I think we've gone through, the whole Civil War and War with Chalced, and now the
meeting with the dragon.
Meeting with the dragon without getting her point of view. So it's kind of catching back up with her post-Road Cairn.
Yes. And post a meeting that has happened off screen. So she is meeting with Mingsley.
Yes.
And he is very disappointed
Mm-hmm. So Mingsley, if you remember, took part of the conversations about the reformation of the new Bingtown and was saying like Serilla should have more power. She's speaking for the satrap, et cetera, et cetera. Like he put all of his eggs into Serilla's basket. He had slipped her that private note earlier on in the book,
Right.
like hinting that like, yeah, there was a conspiracy against the satrap, but not me. I'm part of the good new traders and we're
Right.
allying with you. Just like doing typical Mingsley stuff,
Right.
trying to
Just scummy.
worm his way into more power, similar to what Serilla was doing
True.
earlier on in the books.
Well, with a lot more murder planned than Serilla ever had.
True. So this is a couple days after that first gathering with Tintaglia. Tintaglia is off flying around, and in the meantime, the survivors of Bingtown have been talking about what to do and the specifics of reforming the government and the city there. So this is Serilla talking to Mingsley after those first few days, and he is speaking about those meetings.
Right.
Kind of
And
disappointed in her, like you said, for not taking up the new trader's part as much as she should.
And, so with Mingsley, he had brought forward that Serilla should have all the power, which he did in the first meeting with Tintaglia. But in this other meeting that we didn't get to see, he also brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "We are all subjects of the satrapy. We should be willing not only to have her negotiate with the dragon for us, but to assign us our correct roles in the new Bingtown," which kind of gets to the point of why he wants her in charge, because he thinks if she assigns the correct roles, he's going to get a really good one because he's helped her get this power.
And he's thinking, because she's a woman, she's easily overridden with things, and I can, manipulate behind the scenes.
Exactly.
In the first couple paragraphs, she says that she had already made up her mind to one thing. Now that she was rid of Road Cairn, no man was ever going to intimidate her again. And the start of this this memory about Mingsley speaking up in the meeting, it says that he spoke up on her behalf, but without consulting her.
Right.
So there's a clear theme of her derision
Yes.
for Mingsley through this beginning.
Yes. And his standing up and proclaiming Serilla as the one who should be in charge doesn't really go over well,
No.
which is part of his anger in this conversation. So after he said she needs to be the one to give us our correct positions, Sparse Kelter says, "With no disrespect to this lady, I refuse her authority. She is welcome to sit in with us and speak as a representative of Jamalia if she wishes, but this is Bingtown business for Bingtown folk to sort out." And Mingsley has a problem with that, saying, if you will not cede her the authority due, then I will see no reason for the new traders to remain here, he blustered. It was well known that old traders have no intention of conceding our right to our lands and, "Oh, do just leave," the tattoo woman had sighed, "or shut up and be a witness, but there is not enough daylight for us to discuss the things we must cover, let alone deal with your posturing." And then Mingsley tries his last little attempt at staying and grabbing at power, saying, "I know things you will all wish I had stayed and shared with you, things that will render useless all you agree here, things that..." But before he can get to it, he is escorted out, literally picked up by his chair by a couple
Three ships men.
Yeah.
I want to point out really quickly before we talk about Mingsley is that the language that Serilla uses in this memory is that she names Sparse Kelter and then just says the tattooed woman.
Yeah.
She's still in Jamalia mindset a little bit here.
Although she doesn't say a slave.
True.
So
She's like, yeah.
But she doesn't
Doesn't really
know her
humanize
name.
beyond that.
And they've met a few times now. So
Yes.
So presumably the name was given to her.
Yeah.
But yes, she...
And we can assume it's Dugia, right?
Yes.
The tattooed woman who's a spokesperson for all the tattooed. But yes, he knows things, and then he's escorted out.
So, Do you think those things are more than what he brings up later about
No,
Jamalian? Okay.
I think it's the Jamalian fleet.
How would that change anything, though?
Because a force is going to come.
Well, right, but...
Because he's probably saying because the new traders can negotiate on your behalf, we have contacts there, that sort of thing.
So be nice to us.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Politics.
Yeah. But anyway, he missed the rest of the meeting, but Serilla did not. And she actually ends up taking the advice of Sparse Kelter and just listens for the most part. She witnesses what's going on until it becomes clear that she actually knows more than the old traders themselves about the original charter and the wording and the legality of it all, because she's studied it.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to use that original charter as a basis for what they're doing here in this time and with Tintaglia, in the agreement with Tintaglia.
The new traders had not been as pleased. Now she stared at their spokesman, daring him to take the confrontation further. Yeah, so she didn't take Mingsley's part as he was escorted out. She helped the old traders and the tattooed and three ships folks start to organize their government, gave them advice based on the old charter, and that is why Mingsley is so miffed, because two parts. One, didn't take their side.
Right.
And they were supposed to, right? They're allies in Mingsley's eyes from the same place. And two, it's based on the old charter, which grants them no legal right to be here.
Right. So it is a really interesting place. She also notes that she feels she's gained respect in the traders' eyes for knowing so much about their agreements and their culture. And she really feels like she's starting to make headway there with those relationships.
Yeah, so Mingsley takes her silence as a bashment and just kind of scolds her a little bit.
Right.
And eventually ends up saying, "You can't seriously intend to support the old charter. It offers us nothing. Surely you can do better for us than that. After all we've done for you," he reminded her slyly. They were in the drawing room of Devad's house. The Chalcedean raiders had burned the east wing, but this end of the house was still habitable. She smiled small to herself. Her cup was not cracked. A small thing, but a satisfying one. She had stopped fearing to offend him. She looked at Mingsley levelly. It was time to draw a line. "I do intend to enforce the old charter. More, I intend to suggest it as a basic foundation for the new Bingtown. Perhaps if you were willing to go upriver, the Rainwild traders might offer you the same status as they have offered the tattooed. Of course, it would have the same requirements. You'd have to bring your trueborn daughters and sons with you. When they married into Rainwild families, they'd become traders." "The very idea is abhorrent. Companion, are you mocking me?" "Not at all. I am merely saying that the so-called new traders had best come to the bargaining table with everyone else, and they must understand that, like everyone else, they will have to meet certain terms to be accepted here." "Accepted here? We have every right to be here. We have charters granted by Satrap Cosgo himself, ceding us land, and charters you bought from him for outrageous bribes and gifts, because you knew that bribing him was the only way you could get such a charter. What he could not legitimately grant you, you bought from him. Those charters were founded on dishonesty and broken promises. If they hadn't been, you never would have consented to pay so much for them. You bought lies, new trader Mingsley." So she goes on to say that the truth has now come to Bingtown, that they were built on lies. You know, the three ships immigrants have a right to be here. They negotiated originally with the old traders, so they have a right to be here. And now they negotiated further and are given the opportunity to earn land. And with that land comes votes.
Right. Actually, they're not earning land. They are being given land.
Given grants of land. Yes.
Because of all they've done with the recent Chalced invasion.
They will never be Bingtown traders, of course, not unless they marry into the families. However, I imagine that the Bingtown traders will become a ceremonial aristocracy of sorts rather than a true ruling class anymore. Besides, three ships seem to like the distinction of being three ships. And those of the tattooed who choose to remain in Bingtown rather than go to the Reyn Wilds will have the opportunity to earn land of their own by assisting in the rebuilding of Bingtown. Those that do will receive voting privileges with the land and stand on an equal footing with every other landowner. So yeah, it's the 3 ships get the land. They're getting grants. Tattooed have an opportunity to earn, depending on how much they help out, I guess.
Yeah, which
It's very...
I'm sure, knowing the traders, it is very specific on what
Right.
the requirements are. But here it's kind of like, well, who gets to decide how much help is enough? And
yeah. But Mingsley is actually quite pleased with that. It's like, oh,
why don't you start with that?
Yeah, votes are based on land. We have a ton of land. And Serilla's like, that land isn't real.
Yeah, he says, that's what you should have told me first. If voting and control of the town are to be based on land ownership, then we new traders have nothing to fear. Certainly that is true. Once you legally acquire some land, you too will be allowed to vote on the council. So she doesn't even let him have that brief moment of happiness of, oh, well, perfect. We actually already own land, so... He's
becoming incensed because, yes, she is playing with him a little bit here too, right? So he's super angry and says, like, you have betrayed us. and Serilla's like, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, what did you expect?
You're a snake. Why would I help you? Like,
you betrayed the satrapy once, luring Cosgo to issue grants to you that you knew were illegal. Then you came here and further betrayed Bingtown by bringing slavery and undercutting its economy. Then that was not enough, and you and your cohorts wanted it all. So you tried to get to the Reyn Wilds, and then you also had the conspiracy to kill the satrap.
Right. Like they were originally, that conspiracy that Serilla had thought of, hey, they're probably going to try to kill the satrap and blame it on Bingtowners. That was the new trader's actual plan.
Mm-hmm. You would have used his slaughter as an excuse to let the Chalcedeans kill the Bingtown traders so long as you could keep their wealth for yourselves. Well, you were betrayed once by the Chalcedeans. How that astonished you! But you did not learn. Instead, you sought to bend me as you bent the satrap, not with wealth, but threats. Well, now you are betrayed again by me. If betrayal you would call it, that I stand up for what I've always believed in. In a very reasonable voice, she continued. New traders who labor alongside the 3 ships' folk and the slaves in helping to rebuild Bingtown will be granted land. That the Bingtowners themselves decreed, with no prodding from me. It is the best offer you will get. But you will not take it, for your heart is not here. It never was. Your wives and your heirs are not here. Bingtown, to you, was a place to plunder. Never home. Never a new chance. And this is where Mingsley kind of brings in the Jamelian fleet.
Yes, what he thinks will be a bombshell revelation.
Yeah. And when the Jamelian fleet arrives here, what then? The birds that were sent out to Jamelia primed them to expect old trader treachery against the satrap. Lo and behold, we were more right than we knew. Your Bingtown trader friends were the ones who sent the satrap to his death. And so it was like, wow, you're so bold to talk to me when I have it in your own hands that there was a conspiracy against the satrap. You sent me a note. You signed it that said there was a conspiracy.
Right.
Not you. Of course, not you, Mingsley. But there was from the new traders.
And you know who it was.
Yeah.
Like, come on. And not only that, but she doesn't think there's going to be a fleet, which she is a little wrong on that. But she tells him, I am from Jamelia. I was in the courts. I know the situation over there. I know what their finances look like. And right now on the brink of civil war, when the satrap is missing and they don't know if he's dead or alive, the rich people are going to be hoarding their goods and just in case there is war, instead of funding a fleet to come out this way. There is no money for them to do this. So good luck with that.
Yeah, she says, I know what the conspiracy hoped. You believed your Jamelian partners would arrive with ships and turn Bingtown over to you. Doubtless you thought it wise to have this fallback defense against the Chalcedeans in case they became too greedy. As they did, and far sooner than you expected. So yeah, she's a bit wrong about that. And at the same time, they never really have to deal with it because the Jamelian fleet meets like pirates.
Yeah.
And Chalcedeans and the serpents.
Right.
And there's a big thing at the end of this book, as we all know.
Yes. But she does have a point. and is good in assuming this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good posturing anyway to be like, you're dumb. That's not happening. And she also mentions, and what's going to happen when they do get here? They're going to see Bingtown rebuilding, no strife. They're going to be met with civility and
diplomacy.
And then, mind you, they'll have just sailed through the pirate isles and Chalcedean war galleys. So who do you think they're going to be more amenable to?
Yeah, they're going to be very relieved probably to not find another war at the end of their sail.
Exactly. So she really is pointing out that's a dumb plan you got there, and it's not going to work.
I suggest you consider the new trader's position in Bingtown from an entirely different angle, she kind of goes on to say. Whatever will you do if the satrap is not dead? Or if the dragon speaks truth when she says that Malta Vestrit lives, then perhaps the satrap has survived alongside her. This does not make sense to me, because she has no reason to believe that
they were together.
That they were together ever.
Yeah.
Besides in the same carriage.
However, I will say, just as an aside, doesn't Reyn say he saw her on the boat with the satrap?
I think he's focused on her. I don't remember if he said satrap or not. Thought he said like with 2 other people. And people took it as like, oh, they might be alive.
Right. Okay.
So like, I think the Rainwild people might know that maybe he's alive if satraps or if Malta's alive.
Right.
But I don't know why Serilla would ever be in that conversation at all.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I feel like Rainwild people could have told, because I'm just thinking back to
it could happen. Yeah, that
I think
knowledge could have passed.
Yeah, because I think Road Cairn thought that Malta was in the ship rowing to a Chalcedean ship with the satrap.
Part of the conspiracy.
Yeah, so I think that's why she would think that they could be together, because that was part of Road's conspiracy.
Yeah. That's definitely true then. Yeah. So she says that maybe the satrap did survive. How uncomfortable could that be for you? Especially as I have it in your own hand that there was a new traitor plot against him. So it's like, you're in a bad position here, Mingsley. And she does say that none of the new traitors really want to be here because all their heirs and wives are back in Jamalia. But that is not true either. Some of them do stay. Some of them do labor alongside of the other people and form a new Bingtown, trying to escape their personal lives back in Jamalia.
Yeah, maybe they really didn't like their wives.
Families.
Yeah, their kids.
And she continues on saying, well, we'll see. Oh, did I caution you to remember that this Jamalian fleet must first come here through not only the Pirate Isles, but through the Chalcedean patrol vessels? So here she's talking about what you brought up, is that there's going to be a safe haven at the end of them. We're going to greet them nicely.
Yeah.
There's going to be a dragon protecting the harbor. Did you forget about the dragon? Don't threaten us with a fleet when the dragon promised to protect our harbor.
Yeah. So good luck. Nice try, but better luck next time. And if you're not willing to negotiate, leave.
And Mingsley says, you'll regret this.
Shakes his fist.
Yeah. And says, you would have been carried alongside us to power. You could have returned to Jamalia a wealthy woman and lived out your days in civilization and culture. Instead, you have doomed yourself to this backwater town and its rustic folk. They have no respect for the satrapy here. Here, you will be nothing more than just another woman on her own. Just another woman on her own. Mingsley was not to know that he had flung a blessing at Serilla in the tones of a curse. And that's kind of like similar to what Serilla thought when she first arrived to Bingtown. She wanted to stay, of course, right? She wanted to escape Jamalia, but this backwater town with its rustic folk, that's kind of what she was thinking. But she's changed a bit. And she's finally understood that I actually can start a new life here.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the one that's in charge of everything. I still want a lot of power.
Obviously, yeah.
But I don't have to be in charge of everything, just indispensable to those in charge.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so Serilla is kind of solidifying her position as a Bingtown ally. And in the wake of these negotiations, solidifying herself on the side of New Bingtown.
Yeah. So this is pretty big. And then we finish up this chapter with Reyn's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And he is thinking about the Kendry because the Kendry is coming into the harbor now, but he is changed.
Yes. The affable, boyish figurehead did not wave his arms in greeting or clap and whoop with joy at his safe return. Instead, his arms were crossed on his chest and his face was closed. Reyn could guess what had happened. Tintaglia had told Kendry who and what he truly was. The last few times he'd sailed on the Kendry, he had been uncomfortably aware of the dragon lurking below the ship's surface personality. Now those memories would have bloomed in full. A slow and terrible knowledge rose in Reyn. He was doomed to see this change in every live ship. With each stricken or closed face, he would have to confront what his ancestors had done. Knowingly or not, they had taken the dragons' lives from them and then condemned their spirits to a sexless, wingless eternity as ships. He should have been happy to know that the live ship Ophelia had prevailed in her encounters with the Chalcidians, as Tintaglia had said that Ophelia was also on her way back.
Right.
Instead, he did not want to be there when Greg went down to greet the ship he had loved all his life, and encountered a glowering dragon instead. It was not only the dragon kind he had injured, soon he would see in his friend's eyes the damage done to Bingtown's live ship families. So again, Greg is feeling guilty, and this time
Reyn.
for his Reyn is feeling guilty, and this time for his ancestors' doings.
Right. And I think this is a big thing that hasn't yet been touched on in the book. And
I think Tintaglia harped on it a bit. At least the guilt of his ancestors. Yeah, it's also your fault,
right.
Reyn. Like,
but
it's not just your ancestors. So I think he kind of internalized that part.
For sure. But I think also this is the first time where we're seeing what that actually means.
Yeah.
So
a societal change for Bingtown.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with such a big demeanor change in Kendry. That's a lot. And what do you do then, you know? So I think that made it more real. And now Reyn's really starting to think like his best friend is Greg, Tanira, and what happens when Ophelia hates him now. Because he loves Ophelia. And now what? Although we know Ophelia is one of those ships that claims she was never a dragon and doesn't have any dragon memories.
Doesn't really claim that she was never, but claims that she's something new now, I think.
Yes.
And just like, that's not me anymore.
I think, because I thought some of them say that they don't have memory. Like they just are adamant, I don't have those memories.
They might not, yeah.
And maybe they don't, or maybe they just don't care to acknowledge it. But I think it's really interesting. So obviously Kendry is not one of those. So it's not a great start, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is really eye-opening for Reyn, and now he's kind of mulling that over.
Yeah, and he doesn't really know what to feel anymore. He's been through so much recently. He should be joyous that Malta's alive, that Bingtown is kind of peaceable now.
Yeah, and making a treaty with the dragon.
Yeah, all of that should be good. All would be healed, he says, but somehow he could not trust it to be real. The brief sensing of Malta that he had received through Tintaglia was like the aroma of hot food to a starving man. The possibility of her was not enough to satisfy the longing in his heart. I think this is, again, like, it's good character writing for Reyn, but it's also why he's so annoying. Is that, I can't trust it to be real. Like, I get the reasons.
He's just a melancholy boy.
I know. I get the reasons why, like he still can't really trust Tintaglia. He's not over that yet, even though he was shown that brief hint of Malta being alive. He's just not ready to full on dive headfirst into that belief. But still, it's just reading it when we literally just had a Malta point of view last chapter is so frustrating.
I think to me, in this at least, I feel like this is Reyn's version of being positive. And to be fair to Reyn, a lot has been happening. Like he literally came back thinking his fiance was dead to the middle of a war happening that he had no idea was happening. And
thinking he was all going to die.
Yeah.
Everyone was going to die. And then the dragon showed up who he blamed for his fiance's death.
Yeah. So there's a lot happening in the span of a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And all of that includes the death and resurrection of his fiance and civil war. So
Yeah, that's confusing. I get it.
Yeah. I think it's fair that he's not in a more chipper mood, but I do think he's just a pretty melancholy guy in general. I think he's pretty.
Yeah.
He's definitely, the glass is basically empty.
So he hears a noise below him, looks down and sees Selden kind of picking his way through the rubble. And he's like, "Get out of there. Can't you see this roof is going to collapse?" And Selden's like, "Yeah, that's why you're sitting on it. Duh." I just needed a place where I could look out over the harbor and watch for Tintaglia to return. I'm coming down now. So Selden is bringing news that, yeah, Tintaglia is back. She's gone to groom, but she'll pretty much want the Kendry to immediately bring supplies and workers upriver to start working immediately. And Reyn's like, "Okay, yeah, where though?" And Selden's like,
From
"Well,
where? Yeah.
the supplies from where?" So Selden's like, "Yeah, we'll try to temper her expectations. Bring people. We'll have her escort Kendry bringing people upriver from Treyhog to know where to dig so they can start planning, etc.
Right.
Like, take it in more logical steps, but we should all be there for that." Reyn's like, "Oh yeah, she wants me to be there." Like, well, if she wanted you there, she could have told you herself, but I came myself to make sure you would be there. So you can hold her to her promise. Left to herself, she will worry first about her serpents and the possibility of other cocoon dragons surviving. If we leave it up to her, it will be months instead of days before she sets out to look for Malta. Months! Reyn felt a surge of rage. We should be departing today. A sick certainty came over him. It would be days. Just signing the contract would probably take a day in itself. And then the selection of folk to go upriver and the supplying of the Kendry. After all Malta did to free her, you would think she would have at least a scrap of gratitude for her. The boy frowned to himself. It isn't that she dislikes Malta or you. She just doesn't think that way at all. Dragons and serpents are so much more important to her than people. To ask her to choose between rescuing her own kind and saving Malta is like asking you to choose between Malta and a pigeon. To Tintaglia, most humans seem very similar, and our concerns seem trivial matters indeed. It is up to us to make such things important to her. If she succeeds in her plans, there will be other dragons sharing our world with us. Only they will see it as us sharing their world. And Selden also brings up some Ephraim Vestrit advice and knowledge that he heard. My grandfather used to say, "Start out dealing with a man the way you intend to go on dealing with him." I think the same may be true of dragons. I think we need to establish now what we expect of her and her kind. And that's, it's very intelligent.
Yeah.
And again, this shows such a change. I know this is the magic talking, right? Because Selden is still 10 years old or 11, maybe. Maybe at most 12. Because I think he was more than 2 years younger than Malta. But if he was 2 years younger, maybe he's 12.
Right. I think it's a really interesting change in Selden. And it is unrealistic for a 10 to 12-year-old to talk like this. But the way Selden's been talking all book is this way. So I definitely see why I didn't remember this being so abrupt, because it does.
At the end of last book, we talked.
Yeah.
He's just a scared little kid. And then
now all of a sudden he's, Mr.
Eloquent.
Wisdom himself.
Yeah.
And counseling Reyn, the 23-year-old. This guy's 11 years older than him and needs advice from the 10-year-old. So it's, I think, interesting to see how he behaves, but then we also sort of do get an explanation and
a little
confirmation that it is basically magic that has made him so mature for his age.
Mm-hmm. Selden again tries to reassure Reyn, did Malta feel threatened? We know she's alive. I think a couple days won't matter, at least compared to months. And Reyn's like, well, I didn't really feel that much contact. I just know that she was alive, but I couldn't connect with her at all. And we know that because that's because Malta chose to ignore him because she thought it was just a nightmare and not a real reaching out.
Right. And she didn't want him to see how horrible she looked.
Mm-hmm. So Reyn is kind of looking around as they fall silent here, and he notes that Tattooed and Three Ships people worked alongside traders both old and new. Few of the businesses had reopened, but there were already youngsters on street hawking shellfish and wild greens, and there seems to be more folk in town, so he thinks some of the people who had fled Bingtown earlier are now returning. So life is coming back to town, but we do get our confirmation that old and new traders specifically, are working alongside to rebuild.
Right. So not everybody is running away from, or not everybody
Is
hates
going to flee
this.
or
Yeah.
You seem to know a great deal about dragons, Reyn observed to Selden. Whence comes all this sudden knowledge? Instead of replying, Selden asked a question of his own. I'm turning into a Reyn Wilder, aren't I? Reyn didn't look at him. He wasn't sure Selden would want to consider his face just now. The changes in Reyn's own appearance seemed to be accelerating. Even his fingernails were growing thicker and hornier. Usually such changes did not come to a Reyn Wilder until he reached middle age. It certainly looks that way. Does it distress you? Not much. I don't think my mother likes it. Before Reyn could react to that, he went on. I have the dreams of a Reyn Wilder now. They started the night I fell asleep in the city. You woke me from one when you found me. I couldn't hear the music back then, like Malta did, but I think that if I went back now, I would. The knowledge grows in me, and I don't know where it comes from. It belonged to someone else, but somehow it's coming to me now. Is that what is called drowning in memories, Reyn? A stream of memories flows through me. Am I going to go crazy? Not necessarily. Not all of us go crazy. Some of us learn to swim with the flow, trying to reassure Selden.
I find this really interesting because this is such a unique thing happening to Selden, where he is continuously getting the memories from the Elderling city, despite the fact that he is no longer in contact with the Skillstone or the Elderling city.
And also he seems to imply that it's from somebody and not multiple people.
Yeah, like it was one specific person's memories.
Yeah, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think we get much of anything else. Maybe we get more in the Rainweld Chronicles when he's a point of view character again.
Right.
Or for the first time, I guess.
But I also think in the Rainwild Chronicles, whenever Tamara and I can't think of his name.
Rapskull,
yes. When they are taking the memories directly from a person, it's harder to gauge whether that knowledge comes to them even after they touch the stone. I mean, Rapskull obviously gets entrapped in the memories and thinks that he is this other guy, but Tamara doesn't, but she still is able to recall where things are from the memories.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's hard because they're also still in the city, and I don't know, I guess I thought that was part of why she would be able to.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit this and that kind of conversation because, I don't know. It's a very weird situation, and we don't get the same thing with Reyn at all. He talks about dreams that he has, but it's mostly after Tintaglia breaks down his barriers and floods him with those dreams.
Yeah, he doesn't really talk about them otherwise, but it seems as though he understands what
he means.
What Selden's talking about, and references that sometimes you just have to learn how to swim or go with the flow or whatever. So maybe that is normal.
Mm-hmm. Shorter chapter this week, but it's kind of it's a little rest period after this previous climax of the battle and everything like that, and fleeing from Divvytown. We get a little rest, a little break before the next kind of rise in action.
Right.
A resetting, I guess. So this is how I totally forgot that Althea wanted to have a truce with Kennit.
Yeah.
That's how she gets over to Vivacia.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. And then he just kind of like kidnaps her.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to read. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have thoughts on this chapter or previous chapters, or want to let us know how we're doing or what we could do to improve, you can email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com. or you can find us on any of our social medias. It is Fitz Happy. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, Threads, YouTube, on Reddit, and on Blue Sky as well. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Can't wait to see you next week. All right, time for the best part, what you guys have brought to us.
Before we start, I do want to give a quick shout out and a lot of thanks to everyone who has tipped us on our support page. Thank you so much, Phil, Vanis, Lord Denfire, and Jess.
Yes, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. And now on to some comments. So we're going to start with a Facebook comment we got from listener Ellen. And they wrote in to talk about Kennit's paranoia on Paragon spilling the beans. So while we know as rereaders Paragon is fiercely loyal to Kennit and did not tell anyone about Kennit, it is actually not that far-fetched of an idea that he could have.
Right.
And so Ellen was just pointing out that Paragon just had to make the choice once to tell anybody he knew Kennit, and something of it would have been known, and it would have changed things, at least for Kennit. And so I think that's a really good point. And so I definitely wanted to talk about this because we haven't really acknowledged that Paragon could have told people. We're kind of like, oh, he's all paranoid and focusing on that paranoia because it is paranoia. But also, I think it is important to recognize that is a chapter of Kennit's life that he wants to forget. He doesn't want to anybody to know what happened to him, let alone that he was in that story. So
yeah, Kennit kind of grew up with Paragon, right? They were best of friends, and then they survived trauma together. But now they haven't seen each other for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And Kennit understands why people snitch and tell secrets and stuff like that. Doesn't like it, but he knows that happens.
Right.
So he's very, very worried about his past getting leaked out. And besides, if Paragon couldn't even die like he was supposed to, like they agreed to for him to do, what else did he say? What else did they talk about? So yeah, it definitely is a possibility. But again, as we know, and all three of us, Ellen, you and I have talked about, he is paranoid.
Yes.
He's just paranoid. But they do get it out of him eventually.
True.
He does start talking about it after Althea's captured.
Yeah. And I think something that's really interesting about this whole thing is that there's the whole added layer of, I don't know what to call what Paragon did to Kennit, because it's not forging. It is distinctly, it is similar in some ways, but he also admits in his point of view, I think the last time we were with him, that he did manipulate Kennit in a way that he made it so that he was taking the bad memories away, but leaving with him a sense of leave this behind. And so that paranoia is also sort of
Could be
a direct response to whatever Paragon has done to Kennit in this weird mind meld situation.
Right.
But
and yeah, we say it's not exactly forging, but we talk about it as it's forging every single time because, as you said, it basically is, right? You're removing memories kind of, as we understand it, we as readers, forging somebody. You're removing your touchstones of your previous experiences so you can't grow from that point forward.
Right.
That's what happens to Fitz. That's what happens when you remove all of your touchstones from people. But Rob and Hobb didn't think of it that way, really. I remember there was an Ask Me Anything, a Q&A on Reddit where I read her response of somebody asking about partially forging Kennit. And she's like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way, but I guess it kind of is. Something along those lines. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind that it wasn't written that way to be partially forged, but that's basically the outcome of Kennit. But it's a really good call out that Paragon himself could have directed that paranoia to come around.
Yeah.
Also, he probably learned a lot of it from Ygritte and his environment.
Right.
But yeah, had help along the way.
So thank you, Ellen. That was a really good call.
And we also had a message from Peculiar Ponies on Instagram, who is talking about the changes that the Rainwild folks see and our conversation about what causes those changes, the dragons themselves or the city. And Peculiar Ponies brings up a little bit counter to what we were saying. Not quite, but a little bit counter to what we agreed on last time. Because we kind of determined between the two of us that we went with the idea that dragons were actively making those changes, the connections.
Right.
A dragon that is alive, that is touching minds around it, are actively making those changes. And Peculiar Ponies brings up the talks in the Rainwild Chronicles of Kelsingra and the history of Kelsingra with the human farmers that lived across the river that also had changes. And also what Mercor, who is the dragon of Malkin, talks about to the handlers.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting. So I definitely remembered the farm village being there because that is where I think the party ends up before they go over to Kelsingra.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense too, that people over there would have changes that would be kind of similar because dragons are in and out of there, right?
Right. Well, but that was my thing. I thought there was mention that people lived in the farming villages because they didn't want to be changed. So obviously it's just something I misremembered.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I had thought that they specifically were just regular people who were fine with dragons, but didn't necessarily want to look like an elderling, or that they were really sensitive to the stones and it was turning them crazy too. And so they needed to go live not around there. So I guess in my head, I would have assumed anybody who had the changes was somebody who originally lived in the town, but then moved over there because they couldn't handle the memories.
I guess another something to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, but it definitely could be something I'm misremembering. And I'm pretty sure Peculiar Ponies has told us that they are currently rereading the Rainwild.
Yeah.
So I will take their word for it.
Yeah, they do say that it's lesser changes, but also less flattering because they're not directed.
Yes.
So it's going to be similar to Rainwild Folk, but less drastic than Rainwild Folk.
Right. Because
they're further away.
They're further away. Yeah. And apparently that's just Peculiar Ponies mentions that it is mentioned in the books that it's just the stupidity of the Rainwilders to have lived on top of the city. Like
So that's something else that you were talking about the last time we discussed it, was that you were pretty sure a dragon said it was your stupidity or is your curse, basically.
Yes.
And Peculiar Pony says that Mercor also tells the Rainwilders that their changes are based on their living on the remains of the Dragon City. It's not a true curse, but a side effect of their ignorance of settling there.
Yes. So clearly it's something that happens. I don't understand what it is that makes it happen.
Again,
it doesn't matter, I guess.
It still could be the dragons doing it, right? And Mercor is just shortening that, like, you settled on top of all the dragon remains that were there, right? And that's what changed you. Because again, we talked about, like, people on Aslevjal have not changed.
Right.
Prilkop, obviously that's a little bit different because he's not a human.
Right. Well, and I will say, Aslevjal isn't being mined regularly, and
yes, there's no multiple generations there. We've talked about that too. Yeah. But also, as we mentioned, people who live around, I don't know, maybe the Mountain Kingdom, there might be leftover stuff there, or people who are living around the skill stones all the time. It can't just be worked stone.
Right.
It has to be something with either the memories.
Right.
So maybe living around the skill road itself would also grant you those changes.
Yeah.
I kind of doubt it, but maybe if it is memories. Or it has to be something specifically with cities if it is not the dragons.
I wonder if it was the cities, if it would be the memory of the Elderlings that is creating those changes.
Yeah.
Because I feel as though from everything we've gotten, when people see these memories, they are somehow like that is on a soul level, it seems.
Yeah, it's very similar to Robin Hobb's kind of philosophy for things. If people live in tandem or next to each other, their essences cross.
Yes. So I feel that there's a potential that if you were encountering the memories of Elderlings day in and day out, there's a chance that somehow that's changing you on a soul level.
Yeah.
And so it's going to change your DNA or whatever and turn you into somehow be similar in the changes that you're going to have. So I don't know that the skill road necessarily would give you the same thing, because I don't know how often
Elderlings
specifically were walking on that. Yeah. But if it was a city where there were Elderlings who lived and worked, maybe it would be more likely.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Again, tinfoil hat theory, who knows? But
so then in Eslevjal, there should be changes if a group of people lived there for generations.
Yeah, I would think
is what the theory is then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it would make sense that the first generation wouldn't be changed or changed significantly, because their stuff is getting altered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're passing those genetics down, and they're also getting exposed to it. So I don't know. I feel like it's just one of those things where it has to be a multiple generation without real dragons specifically.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those extra details. It's good to think on this, even if it's just a,
hypothetical.
Yeah, an academic exercise.
Yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you so much, Peculiar Ponies. And thank you to everyone who wrote in. It's always good to hear from you guys, and we love hearing your thoughts, theories, and extra ways for us to fit in a tinfoil hat theory. See you guys next week.